Hello and welcome to this month's WorkRight webinar. This month we're talking about the importance of safeguarding. I'm Chris Jones, Technical Director at Postrite, joined as usual by Ellie Hale, our Business Development Manager for WorkRight. And today we have a special guest with us, Sue Dixon. Sue has worked at Willingdon Community School for the last 20 years, starting as a part-time English teacher before moving up to her current position, which is Deputy Head Teacher 8 years ago. She has also been the school's designated safeguarding leader for the last 10. Sue has a wealth of knowledge and experience in child protection and safeguarding and has been involved in pastoral work throughout her career. The emotional and welfare needs of young people have never been so significant at this present time. And Sue believes all schools and other organisations now need to address not only a greater number of safeguarding issues, but also the ones of greater complexity. Thanks for joining us today, Sue. How are you?
Yeah, very good, thank you.
Good, excellent. Hello, Ellie. How are you?
I'm very well, thank you very much. Excited it's Friday.
Absolutely.
Sue, thanks so much for joining us. It sounds like you are the perfect person to be our special guest star with our new safeguarding course, which I will show after we've had a bit of a chat with Sue. Just to start us off, do you mind telling us a bit about the school and the safeguarding policy that you guys have implemented there?
Yes, certainly. We're a school of 1,000 pupils, and we're quite mixed in terms of our intake. And one of the things that I always stress to our staff is that child abuse and safeguarding issues can happen at any school, because although we're in a very nice area, that's not to say that things can't happen that are unpleasant and abusive towards children.
Yeah.
So we follow the East Sussex County Council safeguarding policy. We're an East Sussex school. So we have a standard safeguarding policy, but we also broaden it out really so that we monitor very small things that may happen to the children, and we have a policy of logging those so that we build up a picture over time so we can see if there are any changes in the way that children behave or the way that they present that we might then pick up on as being potential safeguarding issues.
Brilliant. It's just about making sure that your staff, because it's such a lovely area where your school is, that they're not complacent and think that things kind of go unfound or unnoticed.
That's the thing.
Does site safety come into it? Do you have to what kind of precautions or measures do you have to take with regards to site safety?
A couple of years ago, we invested in metal fences around the school. We've also extended our CCTV quite significantly, and we're also shortly, rather like primary schools already have, but we're going to have an automatic gate at the front entrance. This is partly, so that because obviously of the concerns about aggressive members of the public or attackers, or what you might describe them, who might come onto a school site. We implemented trial lockdown policy 2 years ago. So if there was an intruder on site, we do have this plan which we have practiced about locking down so that we keep the children safe that way. And although these are all quite extreme precautions, I think it makes the children and their parents feel more secure that we have at least thought of these things, and we have got plans which hopefully we'll never actually need to put into practice.
Do you always have to look to the worst case scenario then? Is that how you build your policies and practices?
Absolutely, yes. So we think we look at what's happening in the news. We've adopted the prevent duty, of course, which is a statutory duty on all schools now, and we've done anti-extremism training. But we've also been aware in the past of issues, obviously like Dunblane, where there have been random attackers who have come into schools. So again, as we don't expect these things to happen, but we take precautions in case that situation ever arose.
Of course.
And in terms of regarding children on a day-to-day basis, again, we have to operate, unfortunately, from a sort of level of suspicion, so that if a child arrives at school with a bruise and their explanation isn't convincing, then obviously we would take further action as a result, possibly implicating parents, etc. Because we have to, the key standard rather than, you know, we're protecting other people's feelings. So we'll always operate from that policy of what if.
You're just breaking up a little bit there, Sue. Can you just repeat what you just said? Sorry about that.
Just to say that we always operate from a policy of what if, you know, what might happen and what could possibly have happened, rather than any certainty. So we don't just operate from things that we know. We do operate on a policy of suspicion as well.
In the simplest terms, is it better safe than sorry?
It is, exactly, that's right. So, and the building up of the log over time. So we would, for instance, one example that we've had in the past is a family where we had a child with severe NITs, which were never cured. We contacted parents, they weren't cured, you know, which is unusual. Then this same child had quite extreme dental decay, or often in the same uniform, not washed. And so you're starting to build a picture up over time of possible neglect. And then other things came to light. And in fact, the children were taken into care. So from something that seemed very minor, like NITs, and where, you know, mostly we wouldn't feel any concern about that, we did then track that through.
Yeah.
And so that's the type of basis that we operate on. Small things can be really important over time.
And so is that something that you would record regardless of previous concerns? So NITs is a really good example. If you had a child that came in with NITs, is that something you would put on everybody's log so that you've got a pattern right from the very beginning, or is that something you only?
Yeah, if not necessarily, because and to be honest, it's fairly rare in secondary school, so that's why we pick up on it. But obviously, if somebody's got NITs and they just we contact parents, or parents often tell us, and then it's sorted within a week or so, absolutely fine. We wouldn't need to record that as a concern. But where, you know, obviously the parents aren't intervening and sorting it out, then that's something that we would log at that stage.
That's brilliant. Such a responsibility, isn't it? And so effectively,
yes,
your staff noticing that protected that child.
That's it, and that's something because it was a boy and his sister, and they then went on to have really happy, successful lives at school. And so it's something that we look back on because it was the teaching assistants who first flagged it up rather than the teaching staff. And it's a good example of how everybody is responsible. It's not just the members of the teaching staff. It's anybody who works in the school who has that responsibility.
Brilliant. How often do you kind of have to retrain your staff on safeguarding, or is it something that you are constantly training on bits of information, or when policy changes or situations?
A bit of both, really. It's compulsory for all staff to go through retraining every 3 years. So we've just done that in January. So we trained all the staff. Any member of staff that moves from another school, irrespective of, alas, when they last had safeguarding training, they have to have fresh safeguarding training again. And I myself have to undergo training every 2 years as safeguarding lead. So we're kept up to date very often. And also whenever new things come through, I'm part of a group, a local group for designating safeguarding leads, and we have training every month on an informal basis, and then we cascade that back to our schools.
Brilliant. You mentioned briefly prevent training. Is that something you could go into? I mean, our course actually mentions it, but how is that affected? And when did that come in, and when was that something that was made compulsory? Because prevent is
made compulsory, yes, in 2015. It's taken off now, really, because initially, when it was first introduced, it all seemed quite sort of frightening and a bit over the top, perhaps, for schools to have to deal with. But I think the proof of it has been very valuable. We're now, you know, obviously we do monitor certain students who, for instance, in English or other similar, often writing activities or discussion subjects like citizenship, may voice opinions that are worrying. Because obviously at the end of the day, we're not seeking to criminalize those children, we're seeking to help them and support them and protect them from, and locally, of course, in Brighton and Crawley, young men have, school age, have gone off to Syria and obviously died as a result. So we don't want that to happen to any of ours, nor do we want them to become sort of involved in right-wing extremism.
Of
And there was
course.
an example in the news currently of a young man who went to university in London and placed a bomb on the tube. So again, we want to be able to educate these young people so that they don't get themselves involved in situations like that. And I think there's been a bit of a learning curve for the staff as well, because initially, when it first came in, nationally, I think teaching staff were very concerned about being too invasive, too intrusive into people's views. But I think we've learned to get the balance now, and I think we have a better understanding of what we're doing there.
It's brilliant. Well, it's another thing. I mean, Willingdon. It's hard to imagine radicalisation,
yes.
but I guess that's the whole point of it, that it could happen to anyone from any background.
Right. And there are young people in the town who are referred to the Prevent team, so it certainly is happening within Eastbourne.
Crikey. As Brexit,
although it tends here to be right-wing extremism. It's very low level, but it is, obviously, as the name of the duty says, it is of a preventative nature rather than criminalising them.
Brilliant. And as Brexit and kind of immigration and that feeling, has that changed the way that you, I don't know, you operate the safeguarding, or have you had to take extra measures to protect certain kids from certain backgrounds?
Yeah, we all East Sussex schools and nationally as well will record any incidents of racism or homophobic abuse or any discriminatory language. And we did see a surge in that after the Brexit vote.
Oh, really?
But obviously we've addressed that through assemblies, through our citizenship lessons, and I'm glad to say that that's really died down now. The kids have understood the nature of that, because obviously they're copying the sorts of things that they've seen on the TV. And at present, we're conducting a mock election in line with the general election, again to air some of those views so that kids can get their views voiced and discuss issues rather than just leaving it to the grown-up. And also having a chance to test out their views and to see what's acceptable and what isn't in normal conversation and language. That's
super. That's a great idea. Thanks so much for having a chat with us, Sue. That was really interesting.
You're very welcome. My pleasure.
And thanks for, you checked out the safeguarding report earlier. So
yes, I think it's excellent. No, I think it covers all the key areas, and I think it also gives a flavour of the way that safeguarding has broadened out over the last few years. It's not just obviously about child neglect or abuse, it's so many other things as well nowadays, unfortunately.
That's great. Well, thanks very much, Sue. And I think that leads nicely on to Ellie taking us through the course. Now, Sue, you're welcome to stay and look at the course, but you're obviously incredibly busy as well. So if you want to disappear now, that's absolutely fine as well. So thank you very much.
Cheers, Sue.
That's lovely. Thank you very much,
Sue.
Thanks now then. Bye.
Bye. All right then, guys, I'm going to take you through the course. Our newest one, which we are super proud of. This course was developed because of, again, a need of our clients in all kinds of sectors, actually, that were requesting training that they could give to their staff easily. So this course has just been developed, and we would love to know your feedback. So this course is designed to help you learn the basics of safeguarding children and vulnerable adults. It will help you to recognise abuse and neglect, help you to decide on the right response at the right time, and when appropriate, make a referral. The key guidance for this course is the government's Working Together to Safeguard Children 2015 and the CARE Act 2014. If at any point during the course the content gives you concern about the immediate safety of a child or vulnerable adult, you should report it to your manager, safeguarding lead, or directly to a safeguarding agency. Guidance on when it is appropriate to report a concern or how to do so is provided within the course content. So, here we go, guys. We're going to open up a poll. How many children do you think were referred to social care services by people concerned about their welfare in 2014-2015? Was it 63,000 or was it 635,000?
Okay, guys, so for those of you who've not been on a Work Right webinar before, you should now have in front of you the question that Ellie just read out, and you can choose your answer, and we will then let you know who voted what and then reveal the correct answer. So it looks like a good percentage of people have voted now. We'll leave it open a couple more seconds.
How are people voting?
Well, it looks... Well, how would you vote, Ellie, more importantly, before I let you know what the hive opinion is?
I know the right answer.
So what I would say, I think with these things, multiple choice would dictate I'd always go with a higher answer as my my first option. So I'm going to go, maybe it's as many as 600,000, and we'll see where we go. So it looks to me, before you share your answer, Ellie, it looks like actually most people think it's around 63,000. So it's a fairly even split. 58% of us thought 63,000 and 42%
Okay.
635,000. So let's have a look.
Guys, that's not quite right. The correct figure is 635,000. That's such a high number. Many children are at risk from harm, abuse and neglect. Effective safeguarding is crucial to keep them safe. And linking back to what Sue was saying, I guess it's always best to err on the side of caution when people's safety and welfare are concerned.
I don't know how many children that pool is made up of, but that seems like a huge percentage of the possible people that could be referred. I mean, that's a huge number.
It sure is. Safeguarding is the term we use to describe the steps that should be taken to protect children and vulnerable adults from harm caused by abuse and neglect. Safeguarding means not only preventing maltreatment from occurring, but also promoting the welfare and well-being of children and vulnerable adults. Everyone has a responsibility to protect children and vulnerable adults. Whether you have direct contact with children and vulnerable adults or work or volunteer for an organisation that provides services to them, you need to be aware of the practical and organisational issues raised in this course. We will begin by looking at the implementation of safeguarding best practices and finish by zooming out to see how everyone can help strengthen safeguarding at an organisational level. Since no individual has a full picture of the circumstances facing a vulnerable person, it's important to share information when appropriate and to ensure that safeguarding measures are coordinated effectively. Like Sue was saying, I guess, with the child with the NITS problem. If a person is unable to protect themselves from abuse or neglect due to their age, mental capacity, or care needs, they need to be safeguarded. Children are often vulnerable because of their age and stage of development. They're often dependent upon others for their care, well-being, and safety. A vulnerable adult is someone who cannot make decisions or take actions to protect themselves from abuse or neglect due to mental or physical impairment. The UK nations have different legislation and terminology around safeguarding. For example, in Scotland, a volunteer working with people who are at risk must register with the Protection of Vulnerable Groups scheme. If you're in any doubt, ask your organisation's HR department or manager for guidance. So, the relevant UK legislation includes the Children Act 1989, which states that local authorities are required to provide safeguarding services to protect children. Statutory assessments are used to identify the needs of individual children. The Children Act 2004, which places an obligation on organisations and individuals to make arrangements to cooperate to improve the well-being of children within the local authority. Section 11 makes clear that any services contracted to others on behalf of an organisation must meet requirements for ensuring the protection of children and harm from abuse. The Mental Capacity Act 2005, which states that a person lacks capacity in relation to a matter if at the material time he is unable to make a decision for himself in relation to the matter because of an impairment of or disturbance in the functioning of the mind or brain. This means that we must protect people who are not able to make decisions or take actions to ensure their own freedom from harm. The Care Act 2014 sets out a clear legal framework for how local authorities and other agencies should protect adults at risk of abuse or neglect, including requiring that local authority make inquiries or request others make inquiries when they think a vulnerable adult may be at risk of abuse or neglect. Safeguarding works best when services and organisations share information when there's good reason to do so, such as when the safety and welfare of a child or vulnerable adult may be at risk, or does it work best when they do not share any information?
Okay, guys, I think we all know what we're doing this time. So, does safeguarding work best when we share information or not share information? I think I think I'd be fairly safe in saying that it's probably best to share information. And it looks like I'm going to close the polls now and share it immediately. We have 100%.
Thank goodness. That's
response.
right. In order to protect vulnerable individuals, it's necessary for the right people to have the information they need. A gap in our knowledge could mean that abuse and neglect goes unnoticed. No person alone will have the information needed to protect a vulnerable individual. So, in this section, we've discussed what safeguarding is and who is to be protected. Now we're going to look at the various types of abuse and neglect. Remember, adults may be vulnerable because of physical or mental impairment. Children are vulnerable because of their age and stage of development. Safeguarding is everyone's responsibility, and sharing information securely and appropriately makes effective safeguarding possible. So in order to safeguard someone, it's important to understand the risks of abuse and neglect that they might face. In this section, you'll find out about the different types of abuse and neglect and how you can spot their signs. Abuse and neglect are forms of maltreatment by someone who takes advantage of the powers and control they have over someone else. Abuse and neglect can vary greatly in terms of their nature and severity. Abuse and neglect can be the result of an act or failure to act. They are violations of someone's human and civil rights and can occur in any relationship and can lead to significant harm, including in extreme circumstances, death. So the types of abuse. Physical abuse can include assault, hitting, slapping, pushing, giving the wrong medication or restricting it, restraining someone or only letting them do certain things at certain times. Emotional abuse could be acts that diminish a sense of identity, dignity and self-worth. It could be a one-off act but is usually more persistent and repeated. It could involve conveying to somebody that they're worthless or unloved, inadequate or valued only insofar as they meet the needs of another. It may include not giving the person opportunities to express their views or silencing them or making fun of what they say. It may feature age or developmentally inappropriate expectations being imposed. Emotional abuse is involved in all types of maltreatment, although it may occur alone. Sexual abuse could include rape, indecent exposure, sexual harassment, inappropriate looking or touching, sexual teasing or innuendo, taking sexual photographs, making someone look at pornography or watch sexual acts, sexual assault, or sexual acts the individual didn't consent to, or was pressured into consenting to, and grooming in preparation for sexual abuse. Psychological abuse includes maltreatment of a person by subjecting or exposing them or another person to behavior that may result in psychological trauma, including anxiety, chronic depression, and post-traumatic stress disorder. Such abuse is often associated with situations of power imbalance, such as abusive relationships, bullying, and workplace abuse. It can include emotional abuse, threats of harm or abandonment, depriving someone of contact with someone else, humiliation, blaming, controlling, intimidation, putting pressure on someone to do something, harassment, verbal abuse, cyberbullying, isolation or unreasonable and unjustified withdrawal of services or support networks. Financial abuse could be theft, fraud, internet scamming, putting pressure on someone about their financial arrangements like wills or property, or the misuse or stealing of property, possessions or benefits. Institutional abuse is where there's neglect or poor case care in an institutional care setting like a hospital or care home. The abuse can be through neglect or poor professional practice, for example, because of structure, policies, processes and practices within an organisation. This includes type of harassment or insults because of someone's race or gender, identity, age, disability, sexual orientation or religion. Neglects and acts of omission could be through the often persistent repeated omission of appropriate medical, physical or emotional care. Examples include failure to provide adequate food, clothing or shelter, as well as protection from danger, or failure to access appropriate medical care. The list shows an example of signs that someone might be experiencing abuse or neglect. If one of these things happen, it doesn't necessarily mean that someone's being abused or neglected, but it does mean we need to take a closer look into the situation. So, a deterioration in living conditions which are dirty or unsafe, physical changes looking unkempt or dirty or thinner, inappropriate knowledge or interest in sexual activities, sexualized language or behavior, the onset of physical sexual health problems, such as STIs or unexplained pregnancy, a change in demeanor, for example, quiet or withdrawn, or aggressive or angry for no obvious reason, sudden changes in their normal character like helplessness or depression, physical injuries, especially if repeated or unexplained, the person hinting that something's not right. There are different patterns of abuse. Serial abuse, repeated or recurring maltreatment. An example would be repeated sexual abuse on more than one occasion over a period of time. Financial abuse would be another example of this sort of abuse. Maltreatment occurring over a significant period of time is long-term abuse, such as domestic abuse. And opportunistic abuse is a one-off occurrence, but can still be very serious. Examples could be theft of money or jewelry lying around, sexual assault because the client was in a vulnerable circumstance. Almost all maltreatment of children and vulnerable adults is subject to criminal law. The criminal law continues to develop and respond to changes in society's understanding of abuse and neglect. For example, the Sexual Offences Act 2003 created specific offences for sexual abuse against adults who were vulnerable because of a mental disorder. And Section 67 of the Serious Crime Act 2015 created a new offence of sexual communication by an adult with a child under 16 if the communication is sexual or if it is intended to elicit from the child a communication which is sexual, for example, so-called sexting. In the majority of instances where criminal offences are committed or disclosed, the police are the criminal justice agency responsible for investigating crimes and apprehending offenders. So we're going to go through a scenario here. An elderly lady your organisation has contact with has recently been moved to a care home. She's not in contact with her family. She tells you that she's unhappy in the care home. Is she simply finding it hard to adjust, or should you inquire further? The lady tells you that her door's always propped open, so she's got no privacy or security. She doesn't feel that her carer responds to or even listens to her concerns. Last week, a silver brooch went missing from her room. The care home claims she misplaced it, but she doesn't feel this is fair. And she's bored, and the care home hasn't organised any social events or activities. Is there potential that harm and neglect are occurring? If so, is it your responsibility to do anything about it? Chris, what do you reckon? I would say we probably need a bit more information.
Sorry, Ellie, I was on mute then when I started speaking, so I absolutely would need some more information, I would have thought. But it sounds like it needs to be looked into, and this poor lady's probably got no one to really turn to, and perhaps needs some help.
Maybe ask some colleagues to do some further digging. So you record the details of your conversation and decide that follow-up's needed to establish whether the lady is a victim of harm and neglect. It's clear that the lady's got a right to privacy, to have all of her needs and requests considered fairly, and not to be alienated and neglected by lack of social engagement or fulfilling activities. It's possible that she's a victim of theft. A subsequent investigation finds systematic failures at the care home, and a rigorous plans put in place to learn from the failures. The findings of this investigation form recommendations that improve the standard of care in your area. Though you were initially uncertain about whether to take action, you're glad that you did, and many people have benefited through your diligence. See, it's better to be safe than sorry. So you've noticed that a vulnerable client you regularly see has started to appear withdrawn and not themselves. It's been a few weeks now and nothing's changed. What do you think about this? Is it definitely abuse, or it's not abuse, or do you think we need to look into it?
Well, I think with all these things, Ellie, it's difficult to say definitely one or the other, particularly from what was described. And so I would say that it's definitely warranted that things need to be looked into further. Let's see how everybody else is voting. We've got a reasonable percentage of people voting now. Let's share that.
100%.
So again, 100% of us think we need to look into it, and let's see.
That's right. A change
Absolutely.
in appearance or behaviour doesn't necessarily mean someone's experiencing abuse or neglect, but you can't rule it out because such behaviour can be an indicator. You need to pay closer attention to this case and look into it. Just better safe than sorry. There's just no point taking any chances. So in this section, we've discovered the different types of abuse and how to spot their signs. There are different types of abuse, from physical to financial to psychological. Acts of abuse and neglect are criminal offences. They can take place on a serial, long-term or opportunistic basis, and you must be aware of changes in people's behaviour or appearance. We'll go on to the next section. The 4 R's. Recognising, recording, responding and referring. Recognising. Even if your role in your organisation doesn't include direct work or volunteering with children or vulnerable adults, you may nevertheless have the opportunity to observe and identify behaviours which could indicate abuse or neglect. Everyone has the responsibility to be alert for signs that a child or young person is being abused or neglected. The signs might not always be obvious, and the victims will not tell you explicitly. However, asking simple, straightforward questions about the thing that struck you as unusual or of concern may be the single most important contribution to safeguarding you can make. You should never let the fear of damaging a relationship get in the way of safeguarding. Recording. So good record keeping is an important part. If anyone suspects abuse or neglect, or a disclosure is made to them, an accurate record needs to be made as soon as possible in writing so it can be referred to later, just like Sue was saying with the children that had the nits. When recording details of abuse, it has to be done as factual as possible, describing what was said or done, when, where and by whom, with as much detail as possible, including times, as well as dates, and always use full names. If you're not sure of something, say so, and if you want to venture an opinion, clearly state so. Always write your full contact details at the beginning or at the end of the written record. Responding. If a child or vulnerable adult discloses that they're being abused or neglected, or you form reasonable suspicion that they may be, you need to decide what the most appropriate action is. This will depend on the particular circumstance and the seriousness of the actual potential harm and the particular policies within your organisation. Many organisations have a named safeguarding lead. Their contact details will be within your organisation's safeguarding documentation. It's always good to seek a second opinion about your concerns. If there's no safeguarding lead, it could be from an experienced colleague, trusted friend or line manager. This will help you come to a decision about the response you should make, but be prompt. Never delay in making a response. And referring. On occasion, your concerns may be so serious you need to refer directly to the police or local authority social care. If you're concerned a crime's been committed, you should refer to the police on 999 or 101. If you're concerned about the welfare of a child or vulnerable adult, but there's no obvious criminal offence, refer it to the local authority social care department. When referring, remember that sharing information is essential to safeguarding. Decisions about how much information to share, with whom and when, are important considerations. Weigh up what might happen if the information is shared against the consequences of not sharing the information. So, a crime has been committed where the victim is an adult with cognitive impairment. Which of the 4 R's is immediately relevant to this situation?
Okay, let's have a look. This is a trickier one.
Yep.
So what has everyone voted for? So, well, I would have thought it perhaps would be referring. But I'm not entirely sure. I can back up my answer with much context. Let's see
What's everyone thinking?
It looks like we've got a decent amount of fairly split opinion. However, let's share these results now. Most people did say
It's time to refer. Well, the crime's been committed, so let's have a look. That's right. This matter should be referred to the police for investigation. Well done, guys. So, we've looked at the 4 R's: recognising, recording, responding, referring. Prevention's always better than reacting once a problem's developed, and we'll cover that in the next section. So this section covers preventing abuse and neglect by promoting a safe culture within your organisation. Children and vulnerable adults are safeguarded when they are insofar as it's consistent with safeguarding, given control of their circumstances, and helped and supported to achieve their goals. For example, when a vulnerable adult with limited understanding is helped to feel involved and informed about the decisions taken on their behalf. Children and vulnerable adults are safeguarded when they are treated with dignity and respect and regarded as individuals with needs, wants, desires, values and goals. Children and vulnerable adults are safeguarded when their human rights are respected. Specific rights of children contained within the United Nations Convention on the Rights of the Child include the right to not be discriminated against, that their best interest be a top priority in all decisions and actions affecting them, that they have the right to life, survival and development, which includes the right to education, access to information, freedom of thought and the right to play, and the right to be heard and taken seriously. And the Human Rights Act 1998 includes the right to life, right to respect for private and family life, and the right to personal liberty. When human rights are respected, abuse and neglect are more likely to be prevented. And again, Sue mentioned the prevent duty. Preventing radicalization is similar in nature to preventing other forms of abuse and neglect. Radicalization is the process by which a person comes to support terrorism and other forms of extremism. Vulnerable adults and children may be particularly at risk from radicalization. Many organizations, including schools, now have specific duty in law to prevent people becoming radicalized, and such organizations are likely to have policies in place around assessing risk, working in partnership, staff training and the use of IT. Where a child or vulnerable adult is deemed at risk of radicalization, a referral should be made to the police or local authority where a process for managing the risks will take place. So which of the following is not a reason to have a person-centered approach to safeguarding? So this is what is not a reason: to help the individual feel respected, to allow us to have control over the individual, to give the individual a voice, or to empower the individual.
Okay, well, I think this one is a fairly obvious one for me, Ellie. I think the being respected is obviously a positive thing, and definitely something we want to do with when safeguarding people, as well as giving them a voice and empowering them. So what is left here for me?
So it's not.
I'm not sure we want to be able to control the individual. I think that's perhaps slightly
safeguarding is not about controlling children and vulnerable adults. Absolutely. Did everyone say the same?
Let's have a look. So we have 96% agreed with our view, and we had 4% that thought
That's
that.
Right. It's about empowering the individual, giving them their own voice and space to make choices themselves. So we've seen how to prevent harm and abuse through the culture we promote within our organisation. As well as a safeguarding culture, organisations should have policies and procedures in place to support effective safeguarding. Organisations are required to work together and take a coordinated approach to effectively safeguard individuals. Section 11 of the Children Act 2004 places duty on a range of organisations and individuals to ensure they safeguard and promote the welfare of children and vulnerable individuals. So those are the local authorities and district councils, NHS organisations, the police, the British Transport Police, the National Probation Service and community rehabilitation companies, governors and directors of prisons and young offender institutions, and directors of secure training centres. One of the duties placed on the organisations you've seen are safe recruitment practices when an individual will be working regularly with children or vulnerable adults, including policies on when to obtain a criminal record check, which was known as a CRB and is now known as DBS for the Disclosure and Barring Service. Safe organisations not only recruit safely, but carry out regular updating checks of an employee's DBS. Did you know that a DBS check enables an employer not only to check for criminal offences, but also relevant information that may impact a candidate or employer's ability to provide safe services to children and vulnerable adults? So here's our scenario. Your organisation's been struggling to recruit for an important position. The position involves occasionally working with children and vulnerable adults. When a star candidate applies and excels in the interview, your manager decides to speed the process along to fill the vacancy so your organisation can continue the much needed service. She asks you to contact the candidate and make an offer before the DBS checks have been processed. What do you reckon, Chris? I reckon you'd
It
need
sounds
to be up there.
sounds like not the right thing to do, and particularly given the job role, I'm pretty sure the DBS checks would need to be done
Yeah.
before we got
Unless
much
you make
further.
the offer but don't let them start the role till the DBS check is covered.
I guess perhaps so, but let's see what the right answer is.
So you feel uneasy about the situation, but your manager says, given the strength of the candidate, checks are just a formality. The candidate accepts and you make the appointment. When the results of the checks are returned, it becomes clear there are some problems with the new employee's record. A recommendation is given that the candidate should not be employed. But now it's too late to follow this advice. You discuss your options with your manager. You could ignore the recommendation and save face, or admit a mistake and dismiss the new employee. You've got to dismiss them, surely.
I think at this point, yeah, absolutely. So I think what could have been saved is at the outset, if we'd waited, then we wouldn't be in this awkward situation. I guess what's missing from this sentence is, has this employee been allowed to visit any children or vulnerable adults at this point, which we obviously don't know given the brief scenario, but I'm hoping not. And I'm guessing next, yes, absolutely.
So you agree the employee should be dismissed. Your manager takes responsibility for pushing the hiring decision through before the proper checks could be made. You also take responsibility for not voicing your doubts about this decision. It causes some embarrassment when the news is picked up by the media. The employee explores grievance and legal options to retain the position they should never have had, and this could have been avoided if you'd made your concerns known about the right time. I think what the course is really hitting home is if you've got any doubts whatsoever about anything, just speak up. As well as safe recruitment and retention, safe organisations will support their staff in their safeguarding practice with a safeguarding lead who has experience and training to offer support to colleagues. Their contact details should be publicised and they should be accessible to staff. You should have one-to-one support for staff working in safeguarding, sometimes known as supervision, because working with children and vulnerable adults can be difficult, demanding and emotionally draining, and you need to support your staff where problems and solutions can be shared. Organisations should ensure that safeguarding is part of everyone's business at every level of the organisation. Safeguarding should be part of performance reviews, staff appraisal, team meetings, and internal communications and briefings. Organisations should offer or signpost safeguarding courses to all staff to develop skills and expertise in this area. Organisations should ensure that policies and procedures are developed and updated in relation to safeguarding. And the organisation should be aware of key safeguarding agencies within their area, including local safeguarding boards for adults and for children, and the referral pathways available. Organisations should have a whistleblowing policy to ensure that staff can safely report poor or unsafe safeguarding practice. The policy should be accessible and widely referenced in a range of organisational policies and procedures. So strengthening your organisation's safeguarding. Here are some tips. Conduct regular reviews of safeguarding incidents, look at what happened and what action can be learned and shared. Review how the organisation is working together with other organisations to safeguard. Who are its partners? Why? And are there any partnerships that should be formed? Share good practice so that there's a growing understanding of what works well. Analyse mistakes, so with objective analysis of what happened and why, so important lessons can be learnt. And make sure there's transparency in your policies, sharing lessons when appropriate. The most common points of failure: not recording information, not promptly responding, not following up, not recruiting safely, not making safeguarding everyone's business, and not keeping up to date. So why is it important to consider safeguarding during the recruitment stage? Is it to employ the candidate with the best skills for the job, or to ensure that necessary criminal record checks have been carried out? I think we know this one.
Okay, well obviously it's important to employ someone with the right skills for the job, but I think if we're considering safeguarding, I would say it's about the criminal records checks as opposed to the skills that are relevant to that particular topic. So obviously both are going to be taken into account for whether you employ someone, but with regards to safeguarding, it's got to be option 2.
Does everyone say the same?
Let's have a look. Again,
yeah, well done, guys.
overwhelming majority.
So if someone works regularly with children, then they need a criminal record check to follow the safeguarding procedures. Super. So we've seen the importance of organisational safeguards, both across organisations working together and within an organisation. Remember the sections of the Act that are relevant. Recruitment of new staff is vital, and avoid failure by following the safeguarding procedures correctly and learning lessons if a failure does occur. So guys, to summarise, we've got some frequently asked questions. Who are the vulnerable adults? This is everything that we've learnt in the course. How do you know if something you've seen is abuse or neglect? How do you know if it's a crime? Do you need consent to share information? If I'm worried, should I refer to the police or social care? If I'm worried, should I refer to the police or social care? What if my organisation is not safeguarding its service users effectively? I think I should have been DBS checked, and I'm not sure I have been. What should I do? And I took my concern to my safeguarding lead and they did nothing, and I'm still concerned. What should I do? If you're still not happy, make the referral yourself. I think what we've learned more than anything is if there's any hint of anything going on or anyone's safety or well-being being at risk, it's to voice your concerns. Safeguarding means protecting children and vulnerable adults from abuse and neglect. Safeguarding is everyone's responsibility. It's never someone else's. So that's it for the course. Cheers for tuning in, guys. What we would really like, because it is our new course, is to get your feedback on it. If any of you guys are interested in adding it to your WorkRight systems. And we really have had so much interest from such a range of sectors, industries. We would love to know why this webinar was of interest to you, and what you thought of it.
Ellie, thanks very much. That was a really interesting one, and it certainly touches on some particularly sensitive topics, and so hopefully everyone found that really interesting. And we will thank you very much for everyone that gave up their part of their Friday afternoons. We, as usual, overran a bit. I hope everyone doesn't mind that too much, and we will see you next month. Many thanks. Have a good weekend.